2025 is over. It's gonzo. It's out of here. We are on a 2026, which means it's that time of the year to dump the best movies of the year list. This year, though, I'm doing something a little bit different. Instead of talking about all the 2025 movies or the best movies of 2025, instead, these are the best movies I watched in 2025 for a first time. I barely went to the theater this year in 2025. Since I've been regularly keeping track of movies I watched, this is the year that I watched the least amount of new releases in ever. And I think a lot of that's because I wanted to go back and I want to watch movies that have been rotting away on my watch list for so long. And that's what I did this year, kind of started that. Next year this year going into 2026, I plan on doing that quite a bit. So I think going forward, that's kind of what I'm going to be doing. But I got a list of movies here that I think every one of these are worth a recommendation for one reason or the other. But before we jump into that, I want to start with an honorable mention. That is my movie, Dow's The Story of Helen Roger. This is my documentary that I made, my third feature film. It's available here to watch on YouTube for free. However, if you would like to buy a Blu-ray or DVD copy, there will be a link down below if you want to purchase a physical copy along with my other films as well. All right, that's enough shilling. Let's jump into the list. Number 33, Lucifer's Satanic Daughter. What happens when you mix drugs, gore, trippy visuals, and an entire soundtrack by Electric Wizard? You get one of the most unique experiences I've had in a long time thanks to Lucifer's Satanic Daughter. The film follows a group of stoners going into a house party where the Acid King is. The group do some drugs, and here we go. First off, let me say that this film is filled with a bunch of issues. For one, some of the acting is really bad, some of the ADR is incredibly noticeable and stands out as very amateurish, as does the onset audio. The setup and the characters are very lackluster, characters are very one-dimensional, and the setup is as thin as, hey, let's go to a party. However, once you get past the opening 40 minutes or so, the film starts to pick up and leads into some of the most impressive and disturbing visuals I've seen in a long time. The film goes full force nuts to butts and doesn't let up at all, creating one of the most unique experiences I've had in a while. The visuals mixed with the music and sound effects is a masterclass level of a head trip soaked in blood, sex, drugs, and heavy metal that acts as a satanic meditation that stands apart as a truly unique piece of cinema that I pretty much started off the year with and haven't forgotten. Just keep in mind walking into this one that the title is basically LSD, and that sums up this nightmare pretty well. Number 32, Ernest Scared Stupid. This year I decided to finally jump into the Ernest movies, and while I found every one of them to be a lot of fun, Ernest Scared Stupid really stood out to me as the epitome of what Ernest is, while providing a ton of goofy Halloween fun. With a curse to keep a troll sealed away, only a whirl can release him, and of course Ernest stumbles his way into accidentally releasing the troll, and now he has to team up with the local kids to save the day in a very earnest way. I love Jim Varney, and his character Ernest is endlessly charming. In the 4 Ernest films I watched in 2025, while they're all enjoyable, Scared Stupid is the one that I see myself coming back to about every Halloween. The film is filled with great gags, fun practical effects, and while some moments can be surprisingly gross, it's a family-friendly outing that makes an easy recommendation for the season. Number 31, Donkey Kong Country, The Legend of the Crystal Coconut. One day I was on Facebook when I saw a post from a retro store of the new stuff they got in, and I saw a yellow clamshell VHS with Donkey Kong written on it, and I instantly ordered it. I had no idea this thing even existed, let alone the fact there's a whole TV series of it. The Legend of the Crystal Coconut takes a handful of episodes from the TV series and cobbles them together into a feature-length nightmare that I absolutely loved. I have to say first off that this is not a good movie at all. This is a so bad it's good, because the fact that this thing is even real is such a surreal thing to witness. When I was playing this and they started singing, that's right, this is a musical, I felt like I was launched into another world of disbelief that I couldn't look away from. This is a train wreck that is endlessly fun to watch. The animation is horrific. Late 90s 3D animation is a nightmare aesthetic all on its own, but take into account that the characters' eyes clip through their mouths, belly buttons detach, and multiple characters are the same model with just a different color that makes this a really fun entry into the so bad it's good category that I can't recommend enough if you're into this kind of thing. Between the terrible music, goofy characters, bad animation, I just found myself constantly amused, and it was generally one of my favorite experiences I had in 2025 and a new treasured piece in my VHS collection. Number 30, Conclave. Conclave had a good amount of buzz around it during the Oscar season, even winning one for Best Adapted Screenplay. The film follows Cardinal Lawrence, played brilliantly by Ralph Fiennes, as the Catholic Church tries to find a new pope. That alone on a premise sounds kind of lame, but what you get here is actually a really intense political thriller as these cardinals devolve their less than holy personalities and faults. As a passenger, you watch the inner workings of the Catholic Church with some very stunning cinematography and great performances by the entire cast. Ralph Fiennes and Stanley Tucci, though, give some career highlights here in my opinion, but every twist and turn and vote leaves you engrossed in the character drama up until the credits roll. I walked into this one with little expectations but wanted to check it out because of the Oscars, and I left thinking it was one of the better films at the awards that year. Number 29, Friendship. Friendship stars Tim Robinson and Paul Rudd about a weird dad named Craig, played by Tim Robinson, who has a new neighbor named Austin, played by Paul Rudd. When Austin's mail is dropped off at Craig's house, an unlikely and unhealthy friendship forms. Tim Robinson has a pretty unique style of comedy, and if you're not a fan of his, this film isn't going to change your mind at all. However, for me, this is one of my first real exposures to him and his comedy style outside of viral reels that pop up in my feed. However, I think this style serves this film really well. The exaggerated childlike mentality really helps alienate Craig from his family and Austin. That leads to some insanely but purposely cringe moments that have a unique level of I'm only laughing because I feel uncomfortable, which is honestly a genre of comedy that I really enjoy. Underneath that, though, is some complex characters and relationships that really sells the entire film. Austin isn't exactly what he seems. Craig doesn't really understand who he is, and his marriage has its up and downs that's relative to Craig's own unstable mental state. It's moments like this that pulls you into the story and makes those cringe moments so much more uncomfortable. Overall, it was a great first real experience with Tim Robinson and his style that makes me want to see more from him. And it's also a well put together film that makes me want to check out some more of Andrew DeYoung's other work. Number 28, the Minecraft movie. The Minecraft movie is my hear me out of 2025. When I saw the trailer to this film, I got the same excitement that I had when I first saw the Sonic trailer with Ugly Sonic. But the Minecraft movie didn't decide to change anything about the Minecraft movie like the Sonic movie did, to which I am forever grateful for. I waited for this absolutely insane crowd reaction or these insane crowds to die down before going to catch this one at the tail end of its theatrical release, but there was multiple times while watching this I kept asking Autumn, what are we watching right now? The Minecraft movie isn't a real movie, but it's a post of a film that only cares to have fun and does so in strides. The film makes you ask why and then immediately answer with who cares. The opening scene with Jack Black sets the film up perfectly for the tone, that tone being who cares? This is dumb and we're gonna play into it. The film is just willing to do things and move along, and I could see if you're an actual fan of Minecraft this being stupid and disappointing because it doesn't feel like it takes the source material in consideration at all, but instead uses it like a punchline. It uses the Minecraft world to set up a film that's only here to poke fun at tropes in such an exaggerated way, to the point of making Jack Black and Jason Momoa almost parodies of themselves. I can't believe this is what the Minecraft movie is, and it actually got made, and for that reason, I genuinely loved every second of this film. Number 27, Casa de Mi Padre. 31 for 31 this year had some surprises, to which several films on this list were 31 for 31 picks. That video is out now if you want to check that out, but one of the biggest surprises of this year's 31 for 31 was Casa de Mi Padre, a film that I was only interested in because it's an all-Spanish film starring Will Ferrell. The film follows Armando, played by Will Ferrell, who works on his father's ranch when his brother and his fiancée returns. Armando's brother is involved with the cartel's drug trade, and a relationship between Armando and his brother's fiancée begins to develop. What caught me off guard is just how funny this film is. Imagine Black Dynamite as a parody to black exploitation films. Casa de Mi Padre is that, but for Spanish telenovelas. leaning into the absurd humor like using stuffed animals for a tiger scene and long pauses, damaged film, and overly dramatic expressions of emotion that made the film constantly amusing throughout its runtime. This to me was one of the funniest films I watched in the year, and I can easily see myself watching it over and over, and the film feels like a comfort watch. Will Ferrell does such a great job here, and for some reason hearing him deliver lines in Spanish is kind of a punchline in its own right. This is a great example of parody work that was a breath of fresh air this year to me. Number 26, The French Connection. The French Connection isn't the only William Friedkin movie on this list, but as a part of 31 for 31, it stood out as one of the best of that challenge. Popeye Doyle's a rough around the edges detective in pursuit of a French drug dealer to try and stop a large heroin operation. Doyle, played by Gene Hackman, who gives a standout performance as one of my favorite parts of the film. However, another standout is how intense the film is and how well it's shot. Friedkin is a master at creating suspense with the camera. My two favorite scenes in the film are the chase scene, which is masterfully done, that acts like a centerpiece of the film, and the train scene where Doyle is following the French drug dealer. That scene was just really funny to me. The French Connection is a gritty and sleazy detective story with a lead detective that's almost as sleazy as the villain of the film. While the film doesn't stand out to me as much as some of the other Friedkin movies I've seen so far, there's no denying the filmmaking here and how engrossing the story is. Number 25, The Intouchables. The Intouchables is another big surprise from 31 for 31 this year. It's a film that I honestly didn't really care much about and didn't really seem that interesting to me from the synopsis and the box art. But it's a movie that I've heard a lot of good things about, and it's on my bucket list scratch-off poster. After watching it, I can see why people really like this one because it's a heartwarming story with two great lead characters that's backed up by two great lead performances. Durst is a man who lives on the rougher side of life who's applying to a job to earn his benefits. When he applies to a wealthy man's job listing for a home care aide, the wealthy man Philippe is a paraplegic who can only move his head. He ends up hiring Durst for the job. The two form an unlikely friendship, and first off, I just want to say that this film is extremely predictable, and while that normally would be a bad thing, here it's not even noticeable because what really takes front and center is the main characters and their relationship. The connection between Durst and Philippe is rich and dynamic, playing off each other really well. Sure, Durst being a disadvantaged black man who's plagued with every stereotype meeting an uppy white man who's plagued with every stereotype sounds boring on paper, but the way Francois Cluzet and Omar Sy portray these characters is really what drastically elevates those trappings into a heartwarming and surprisingly funny film that kept me deeply invested during its runtime. I can see why this film has had so many remakes because it's a very safe and comforting story that's easily translatable, but what Cluzet and Sy do here feels uniquely original to this film and feels impossible to replicate. Number 24, Mute Witness. Mute Witness is a film I found out about by my buddy Dylan England, who talked about how great it was, so I found a copy at a flea market for next to nothing and loved every second of it. The film follows Billy, a special effects artist working on a film that's being produced in Russia. She is a mute who can't speak, but one night working late, she comes across some Russian actors and a crew in the middle of making a snuff film, and she must escape them because she is the Mute Witness. Mute Witness, though, is honestly a white-knuckle thrill ride that kept me on the edge of my seat because outside of Billy's friend and her boyfriend, who is also the director of the film, you can't really trust anyone else because of the level of corruption in Russia. The snuff makers work for a very rich and powerful man who is played by Obi-Wan Kenobi, who controls a lot of the police force because they're on his payroll. The entire film is a cat and mouse between Billy and the crew to where Billy never feels safe. She feels hopeless and doesn't have a voice to call for help either, which amplifies the tension in the scenes. Not to mention the gritty nature of the cinematography and sound design that feels like a wall of atmosphere that can almost feel suffocating at times. This is an absolutely great thriller that you shouldn't miss. Number 23, The Italian Connection. The first film by Fernando Di Leo on this list, and if you watch my video I did on Fernando Di Leo, you'll know a couple more of these films will pop up. The Italian Connection is the second film in the Milu trilogy where a small-time pimp is framed for stealing a large amount of heroin. The main drug dealer hires two Americans to take him out, but the young pimp must find the real thief to clear his name. The Italian Connection is a gritty crime film where there's not really a good guy, but you do end up rooting for Luca, the small-time pimp, especially after the turning point during the middle of the movie. That was a real shock to see what happens to him on screen. Luca isn't a good guy, he's a pimp, and the film tries to play him off as a decent guy who lives a bad life, but as the film develops, so does Luca, and his complexities comes across as more understanding. He has redeeming qualities that organically show during the film, telling you to root for him. He is still not a good guy, but is the lesser evil who has something truly traumatic happen to him, and that makes it hard not to be empathetic towards him. The film though is action-packed, as well as Luca is constantly on the run, that opens up to some great chase sequences and a climax that really stands out for a pretty fun use of machinery. Number 22, The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst. The Jinx isn't a film, but rather a mini docu-series about Robert Durst, a nepo baby from an extremely wealthy New York real estate family that has a trail of dead bodies behind him. I'm including this series because this has some of the most compelling documentary true crime moments I've ever seen captured on camera. While I really want to spoil this series for you to talk about why I think it's so captivating, I implore you just to watch the series. I actually watched this twice, once by myself, and then I had to show it to Autumn. It was almost as fun watching it a second time to see her reaction to certain moments as it was when I discovered those certain moments during my first watch. While I do think the first episode of Season 2 is one of the best moments I've seen captured in a long time, Season 2 definitely drug out farther than it needed to be. It definitely feels like there was an episode quota for Season 2, but there are some amazing moments outside of Episode 1 of Season 2 in Season 2. The story of Robert Durst is an inherently interesting one, shrouded by mystery and death, that already makes it a recommendation-worthy watch. The series is also well put together between testimonies, old footage, and recreations, but those bombshell moments made it one of the most interesting watches of 2025 for me, and one that I love to talk about with people who've seen it. If you know nothing about the Jinx, go in blind, and I promise you will be rewarded. If you already know about Robert Durst's story, I still recommend this series just because it's a really well put together docu-series that's worth a watch. Number 21, Bound. I never thought I'd see anything by the Wachowskis that would end up on a best I watched in that year list, but here we are with 1996 Bound. This is one I picked up a few Criterion sales ago, and what really intrigued us more than anything about this film was just Jennifer Tilly. This household is big on Jennifer Tilly, and she's great here. The film follows Gina Gershon's character Corky, who is hired as a handy woman for the apartment complex, where the apartment she is working on is next door to Violet, played by Jennifer Tilly, and her husband Caesar, played by Joe Pantoliano, apartment. Corky and Violet begins an affair that leads into a scheme to steal money from the crime family that Violet's husband, Caesar, works for. I love movies that can subvert your expectations, especially when it comes to ones that involve a high-stakes plan, like this pseudo-heist, where you don't know if the plan will pan out, and the subversions pop up as forks in the road for the established plan. Watching Corky and Violet navigate this situation is constantly fun and exciting as it pans out, while Caesar and the Mafia's inner workings bring a lot of thrills and stakes if it all goes sideways. A film that's so self-contained it's basically two apartments feels so much larger in scale that I kind of wish the Wachowskis would come back to visit something this small. A huge problem I have with them is that a lot of their films are massive concepts, and I feel like they can't coherently develop them. However, their craftsmanship in creating a much larger scope in a confined space is a hard thing to pull off, and Bound does it effortlessly. The sleek, almost sexy filmmaking that helps submerge the Matrix into the pop culture lexicon is fully present here in Bound as well, if not more conceptually executed than their smash hit. Bound is a stylish, sleek thriller that unfortunately for me acts as the high of the duo's career. Number 20, Sinners. 2025 was a weird year for me, as I only went to the theater a handful of times this year, and on top of that, I watched very little new releases this year compared to previous years. But one that I was excited for that lived up to my anticipation was Ryan Coogler's Sinners, a blues-inspired vampire story about two twin brothers played by Michael B. Jordan, who wants to open up a juke joint. The brothers have earned their wealth in various dubious ways, but the juke joint will be a clean start to give them a place for their people to be until an Irish band shows up wanting into the juke joint. Then be some vampires and all hell breaks loose. I love the blues, I love vampires, and I really loved Sinners. The film is a carefully crafted piece soaked in as much mythos as it is blood. Not only is the action of the film handled expertly, but so are the characters. Opening the film up on basically the ending of the film sets your expectations that horror will come, and when it does, it doesn't disappoint as it tears through a cast of characters that you feel connected to like a part of your own community. The film takes its time to develop rich and interesting characters that feel like a living community, and Michael B. Jordan being able to balance as both brothers and make them stand out on their own as complete unique characters deserves recognition for his performance. There's a scene midway through the movie that's done as a oneer that is one of the best scenes I watched all year and how it was handled, and while I enjoyed some of Ryan Coogler's previous work, I feel like Sinners will hopefully be a sign of things to come and not a standout in his career, despite it being such a standout in 2025. This film for me delivered on every point that I wanted it to, and as someone who has been craving a really good vampire movie, Sinners didn't disappoint. Number 19, Christine. No, I did not mean to make that rhyme. It was not on my mind when I was writing this time. One of the biggest surprises in 31 for 31 this year was Christine. This is a film that I've always wanted to see just because I've heard it over the years as the killer car movie, and that's really about it. I didn't know this was a John Carpenter movie until the opening credits, which shocked me because I love Carpenter's work, but I've never heard this one really connected to him or brought up, which is a shame because it will easily become a Halloween favorite for me, and in my opinion, one of my new favorites from Carpenter himself. Christine is about a boy that buys a car and fixes it up. The car's name is Christine, but it's a possessed car that kills people, and the owners become obsessed with restoring it. While the main cast of characters is relatively forgettable, what isn't is Christine herself, as the film presents some truly unique and fun kills. My favorite easily being the time the car crushes itself down the alley to pin the victim. This to me is the perfect definition of a popcorn movie. It's such a fun and easy watch that has lightning quick pacing that you can just sit down and enjoy the flick with some snacks and have a good time. But backing up that good time is Carpenter's unique presentation with stunning visuals and a great score that feels technically as well made as other Carpenter classics. Christine is just a ton of fun. Number 18, A Bronx Tale. A Bronx Tale is a film that I've wanted to see forever, especially after seeing so many clips of this movie pop up in my For You pages, and after sitting down to finally watch it, it's a certified classic in the mafia gangster crime drama. Robert De Niro plays Lorenzo, who's raising his son Calogero in a neighborhood run by Sonny, a leader of organized crime in the area. Calogero witnesses Sonny murder a man but doesn't rat him out, which makes Sonny want to take the boy under his wing. This causes issues with Lorenzo, who wants his son to be an honest man. A Bronx Tale isn't without its issues, that mainly being a large time jump into a less than stellar third act, but where the film dips for a moment, it makes up for in a truly masterful first and second act, along with a full circle climax that opens up for some of the best scenes I've seen De Niro put out there. This film is loaded with iconic scenes and masterful line delivery that makes up for any shortcomings that it might have, which makes it for an easy recommendation. The way the film balances the moral fiber of the two characters, with the third main character being stuck in the middle to see both sides, opens a doorway into a conversation about ethics and the complexity of growing up with your surroundings, acting like a cautionary tale by presenting both sides of the aisle with all their glories and blemishes of both. It's those aspects mixed with those stellar performances that makes A Bronx Tale an instant classic for me. Number 17, Lake Mungo. The world of mockumentaries is a really interesting one that I haven't been able to find too many examples of it done well, but Lake Mungo might take the cake as one of the best ones I've seen so far, if not the best. A mockumentary sets out to create a piece of fiction but told in a documentary style presentation, and Lake Mungo follows the story of a girl who was drowned in a lake and the effect it's had on the family. With this also being a horror film, we dive a bit more into the unknown, but where Lake Mungo really shines is creating its authenticity that at times will make you forget you're watching something fake. The film builds its tension by cleverly revealing information at the right time to keep you constantly engaged and grow the story behind its simple premise. While I've heard a lot of people say this one is rather disturbing, I didn't find it very disturbing, but just utterly fascinating. Through the film's twists and turns and introductions introduction to new characters, it kept me guessing the entire time as to what is really going on here. Everything seems suspicious. We get answers to previous questions, but that opens the door up for even more questions, which is where I think the film really strives. Nothing feels staged, everything feels believable, and for that reason alone, it's worth a watch and it's stuck with me ever since I watched it. Number 16, The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie. If you're my age, then you definitely grew up with some form of the Looney Tunes, and I didn't know that I needed a Looney Tunes body horror movie in my life, but here we are. The Day the Earth Blew Up puts Porky Pig and Daffy Duck front and center to save the world from a bubblegum that controls the minds of those who chew it. All this being set up by an alien that seems to be threatening Earth. I want to start off by saying I love the animation here. It's a great blend of styles and everything looks fantastic. The film really leans into the medium to deliver not only its punchlines, but also amplify the horror elements. I also love the fact that the film does lean heavily into body horror and science fiction side to deliver something that feels really original to Looney Tunes. Sure, some of the plot beats are par for the course, but Daffy Duck and Porky Pig are such a great duo to watch together on screen that it makes those predictable moments still enjoyable to watch. The film perfectly balances its humor and horror to make a family-friendly film that I would have been obsessed with as a kid. As an adult, I still loved every second of this one and I'm looking forward to a rewatch. Number 15, Caliber 9. Fernando Di Leo's first entry into his Milu trilogy, Caliber 9, is a super stylish, gritty gangster flick that puts up Ugo Piazza into a sticky situation. Just released from prison, Ugo is greeted by his former employer who believes he stole $300,000 from them. As the viewer, I started to wonder if he did it or not as he proclaims his innocent, but doesn't really pass the sniff test. My standout by far in Caliber 9 is how amazing the score here is. The score is fantastic. Mix that great score with some great cinematography and you get a super slick film that grabs a hold of you and doesn't let go when the bullets start flying. Much like the other films in this trilogy, nobody here is a good guy. And while Ugo is the more likable than the rest of the cast, there's something off about him as well. Between being hunted down by his former employer who is a psycho and Ugo's connection to another big mover, we see the intersections of a deadly chess game that I loved every second of. Number 14, Good Boy. Good Boy is a horror film from the point of view of Indy, Todd's dog. Todd is sick and moves into a rural family home when what could potentially be something supernatural going on. Indy is a good dog, a great dog, a good boy, and deserves an Oscar nomination, and if Indy doesn't get one, I say we boycott the Academy Awards this year. In all seriousness, I will say I was blown away by Indy's performance. The level of curiosity in his face and how emotionally the dog is through its body language honestly grounded the entire film and sells it. The film expertly uses that point of view to its own advantage to muddy the waters between reality and fantasy that keeps you wondering what is actually happening in the real world outside of that dog's perspective. The main character Todd plays out like a tragedy, but it isn't just surface level. Paying attention to the background of the film unlocks a surprisingly emotionally deep film that manipulates its emotional weight to traumatize the viewer through the dog's eyes, and it's constantly effective throughout its rather short runtime. The film looks absolutely stunning, and the same goes to its excellent sound design. The play with the moving shadows of what lurks in the unknown looming over the main character's own issues cements the horror and the bond between the dog and the viewer. I love when horror gets experimental, and Good Boy is indeed a good boy. Hashtag nominate Indy. Number 13, White God. I didn't purposely put two dog movies together, but here we are. White God was my favorite film I watched in this year's 31 for 31, and is about a young girl going to live for a few months with her father. Her mother and father have split up, and it doesn't seem like a very good split. She takes her dog Hagen with her, but when her father doesn't want to pay for the dog's fee at their flat, and a neighbor is complaining that the dog bit her despite only saying that because she herself doesn't like dogs, her father forces her to abandon her dog on the side of the road. Hagen then finds himself getting caught and sold to a dog fighter, and a lot of horrible stuff unfortunately happens to him, all while the girl is trying to find him. There's a couple of reasons I think this film is great. One, the emotional core between the girl, her father, and the dog is one that is turbulent, but each is trying to find and navigate through this their own way. Each of these three characters have large growth for good or bad throughout the film, So as a character piece, it feels very rich. The technical side of the film is impressive, especially when it comes to having an obscene amount of dogs on screen at one time. And of course, another reason I love this film is the dogs. There's a lot of bad things happening to the main dog, Hagen, but you can't help but at times to notice the wags of the tail, and clearly, despite how bad the film is trying to sell it, the dog is having some kind of fun. To me though, the film really shines during its rather insane climax. That when I went to boot up this film, I had no idea it was going to go this route, and for the film to be as willing to go this balls to the wall at the end of the film, I applaud you. This is one of my favorite third acts I've seen in a long time, and for that alone it's worth a recommendation. Of course, that third act wouldn't work as well if the film didn't properly set up the characters and send them down the roads that it did, so it feels like a full circle moment that was very satisfying. Another reason I love this film is that according to IMDb trivia, the film used a lot of shelter dogs to film with, which resulted in a bunch of adoptions, and I love that. Number 12, weapons. I remember watching the Whitest Kids You Know sketches on YouTube way back in the day, and they're a trope that I quote a lot. I never expected Zach Cregger to go down the Jordan Peele route and start directing horror, but 2022's Barbarian proved that there was more to Cregger than comedy. His newest outing in 2025's Weapons showcases how powerful of a voice Cregger really is. Weapons is a non-linear story about a town where a bunch of children go missing, besides one. The film is broken up into multiple chapters, each following a different character throughout the same timeline as the other stories. Structuring a narrative like this could be really tricky as to not make the story feel repetitive, stale, or to make the subsequent stories feel ultimately predictable. Weapons might be one of the best examples of how to pull this structure off properly, as each story deepens the well to a point that you can't get out of it anymore, pulling you into the dark depths as the story implores you to become a part of. The mystery surrounding Weapons townfolk is rife with characters that feel familiar. I feel like I know some of these people in real life, and that authenticity amplifies the horror as you watch horrific things happen to these people. It's brutal, it's fast, and it's horrific, and I can't wait to see what Krieger does with Resident Evil. Number 11, Flow. Flow is a movie that has my name written on it. A beautifully animated film about a cat and his merry band of critters trying to survive a world that's being flooded. Count me in. Flow is a film that carries a warmth of charm throughout its runtime, even during the rain. The animals feel more evolved than what we would probably consider them to be, but I think that showcases the resilience of animals. Sure, species tropes littered the actions of the main cast, but there's a strange sense of family within this group that's undeniable as each tries to find a new normal in their newly ever-changing world. To call Flow a beautifully animated film would be underselling how truly breathtaking the animation here is. The film feels like a moving painting where every frame could be plucked and printed onto canvas and hung on the wall. But there's also a strong sense of cinematography to build scope, to fill the world, and add emotional dimensions to our voiceless cast that transcend their expressions. As the viewer, we're not sure why this is happening. We're not sure where everyone is. We are left to piece things together that perfectly puts us in the paws of our furry little cast, making the viewer a part of the party. When the film goes almost cosmic, it feels almost supernatural, like there's a purpose to everything, and we are driving, or should I say floating, to find that purpose. It's a preset destiny to find our own way. I can't wait to grab this one on Criterion, and I strongly recommend checking this one out. I like every movie on this list. I made an entire list of movies that I would strongly recommend checking out, but I still feel like it's necessary to say I strongly recommend this one. Now, before we jump into the top 10, I want to actually give out some real honorable mentions. Now, I wanted to put these in the honorable mention category because I do have some personal connections to these that I don't feel right putting them into that main list. That being said, I want to shout out Dylan England. He's a good friend. We've done a couple collaborations. We talk on the reg. I'm sure I could say that stupider. But he dropped this year another feature film, Vignettes, which is free to watch here on YouTube, and a short film, Sardonic, that I actually went and helped him with. And those are available on his YouTube channel. I'll link his stuff down below. Outside of that, I also want to give a shout out to Ian Wang. Now, Ian is somebody that I don't personally know, never met him, but these were sent to me by Nikki Kapadia, who is a longtime longtime collaborator with Dylan. I've met him through Dylan. I've talked to Nikki a couple times, so he sent me these from his new production company, and that is Ian Wang's short film Under Their Roof and Break Room. Now, I don't believe either of these are available to watch anywhere quite yet, but both of these short films I thought were really fantastic and really well done, and I just felt kind of like I shouldn't put it in the main list just because I do know Nikki somewhat, so I didn't feel right putting it in the main list, but I definitely wanted to shout these two dudes out because they're doing great work, and a lot of it, well, at least a lot of Dylan stuff is available here on YouTube. But I'm definitely curious to see what Ian does next, and I'm definitely excited to see what Dylan does with Rocky Wake. Now let's jump back into this list and finish it out. Number 10, The Ugly Stepsister. Cinderella isn't a fairy tale that I really care much about, but what happens when you take that story, put the point of view on the ugly stepsister, and turn it into a body horror? You get one of the most gut-wrenching horror films I watched in 2025. The Ugly Stepsister does just that. Elvira and her sister and mother move in with a wealthy man and his daughter when the wealthy man dies and Elvira's mother inherits their wealth. While treating Agnes, her new stepdaughter, poorly, aka Cinderella, a natural beauty in the eyes of the world, their money is running dry. A ball is being held for the prince to find a wife, and while Elvira is considered conventionally ugly in this story, her evil stepmother will stop at nothing to make Elvira into the most beautiful for the prince. This is Emily Blichfeld's directorial debut, and it's been a while since I've seen such a powerful debut. First off, the cinematography and wardrobe are absolutely stunning here, and while the performance and score match it, the standout is the grotesque body horror that at one point actually made me pretty nauseated. While a lot of other body horror films lean into the more fantastical, The Ugly Stepsister stays brutally grounded into rough plastic surgery practices, self-mutilation, and a get skinny quick scheme that still gives me chills just thinking about it. The fantasy element of the film comes into the reward aspect of the self-destruction that feels almost as horrifying as the disturbing grounded body horror. I also love the fact that while all this is going on, Cinderella is following her fairy tale story that we all know in the background. This is why the public domain is an important artistic tool. For every Winnie the Pooh blood and honey we get to have a chance at something as profoundly mold-breaking as The Ugly Stepsister. Number 9, The Boss. Finally finishing off Fernando Di Leo's Milou trilogy, The Boss, or Il Boss from 1973, was my favorite of the bunch. A hitman finds himself in a mix-up of a mafia war as everyone strives for power. This movie is just awesome. The opening scene exploding a bunch of mafiosos in a sleazy skin flick theater sets the stage for a gun-blazing pseudo-political thriller. The constant twists and turns of the story, bouncing between backstabs to set up what feels like every character is playing 4D chess. As the viewer, I just never knew what was going to happen next. Henry Silva plays our lead Nick Lanzetta, a cold-blooded hitman who seems loyal to his employer, even to the point of rescuing his kidnapped daughter. See, one family blames the other for the opening attack, and this starts pretty much an all-out war. However, Nick knows what he wants, and everyone seems to be his pawn, which is what makes the story here so much fun. There's some good cinematography, not quite as strong as Caliber 9, but the film mixes some of Caliber 9's incredible score with some equally great new original pieces. While I found the whole box set to be pretty awesome, The Boss has stood out to me the most out of the bunch. If you want to watch some old Italian gangster flicks, I'd argue you can't go wrong with the Milou trilogy. It's worth noting that each film is a complete standalone, so yeah, definitely check this one out, but for me, The Boss is The Boss. Number 8, Bring Her Back. Raka Raka, or the Filippo brothers, are carving their way into being some of the best horror directors working today. Their debut, Talk to Me from 2022 or 2023 depending on when you got it, took rather generic horror tropes and infused so much energy that it twisted those tropes into something wholly original. Coming back for their sophomore release with Bring Her Back, I feel like the duo has stepped it up even further and broke away from some of those tropes to bring one of, if not the best horror film of 2025. Bring Her Back follows a brother and sister that moves in with a new foster family. Billy Barrat plays Andy, an overprotective brother of his blind sister Piper, played by Sora Wong. While Andy for the most part has some good intentions, his temper and overprotective nature makes him a troublesome foster child to handle. Their new foster mother Laura, played by the always excellent Sally Hawkins, believes that she can take on the challenge even though she has her hands full with her son Oliver. However, when the brother and sister move in, something just isn't right. Opening the film with some bloody and unnerving ritual scenes, that only sets the stage until Andy and Piper show up. The film makes you put up your guard much like Andy and Piper, but you slowly start to let your guard down when you're caught lacking. The film expertly creates a false sense of security only to rightfully abuse your trust and throw you into a whirlwind that Andy and Piper are now facing. The film does such a great job at connecting the audience to Andy and Piper that when things start to go sideways, you can't help but to sit on the edge of your seat and root for them. While the film feels more mature than and Talk to Me in scope, the film brings back that pulsating energy that Raka Raka brings to the table to make some insanely hard-hitting and riveting moments. Much like Zach Krager, it's great to see some insanely talented new voices in the horror genre, and I can't wait to see what the brothers do next. Number 7, The Order. Justin Chazelle to me is one of the most underrated directors working today, and he's a master at creating tension so thick you couldn't even cut it with a lightsaber. The Order is his newest feature, loosely based on real events following Detective Terry Husk, played by Jude Law, who is making connections to robberies in the Aryan Nation. This is where we meet Bob Matthews, played by Nicholas Hoult, a radical extremist involved with the robberies. While the film plays out rather by the numbers in terms of a crime thriller like this, Jude Law and Nicholas Hoult give truly some of the best performances I've seen from them. Chazelle does such an amazing job at building tension between characters, but when the action shows up, it's always some of the most memorable, powerful, and thrilling stuff put on the screen. This isn't like a straight up action movie. None of his movies really are. They're more like explosions of violence that pop loudly against a rather quiet but ultimately dense atmosphere. Chazelle has such a strong visual style, which leaning into a darker narrative like this helps to kind of match his style, and those slower moments that he brings to the screen sinks you deeper into that narrative. Wide shots add as another tool for him to craft what I think is such a powerful directorial style that definitely lends its way to a story like The Order. The willingness to explore the human side of evil is not done to be sympathetic, but rather to make the audience realize that there are evils in humanity. Stripping away that almost comic book-like nature of modern villains makes you realize that anyone could be capable of this. To me, The Order goes up there along with the Snowtown Murders and Macbeth as some of Chazelle's most riveting work. Number 6, Life of Crime 1984 to 2020. Life of Crime 1984 to 2020 has stuck with me for the entire year, even though I watched this at the beginning of 2025. This is a film that I think about on a regular basis and is one of the most powerful documentaries I've ever seen about drug abuse. The film follows Robert, Freddie, and Delirious from a younger age and the ravages of drug abuse over 3 decades of that abuse and what effect it has on them and their bodies and their whole entire life. We start the film off with wild, bushy-eyed young adults with their lives just beginning, and the film drags on. We watch that life just get sucked out of them. Their eyes once full of wonder and spunk, now soulless and dead. The film captures such an honest downfall of humanity that echoes across anyone who has ever dealt with loved ones or communities that are under the thumb of a high. It's incredibly disturbing but insanely powerful as a cautionary tale that not everyone recovers from this. You watch hoping for the better, but only to be time and time again to watch these 3 self-destruct. What you see on screen is heartbreaking. It's something that I think is an essential viewing, not only because it showcases the power and control that drugs have on people, but because it captures 3 people's lives and sums up their existence and their tragedy while here on Earth. I don't want to spoil the film because you need to watch this for yourself, but I was left with an experience that I haven't stopped thinking about, and ultimately heartbroken to see how utterly life-destroying this stuff can be. Number 5, Sorcerer. William Friedkin is back on the list with what might be my favorite film from him I've seen so far. I mean, it's either this or Exorcist, but I'm leaning a little bit more towards Sorcerer. The film is about 4 men who, for different reasons, had to leave their lives and start anew in South America, but their new lives have been full of hardships. When an oil company needs dynamite that is highly volatile because of its improper storage, they need that transported through South American jungle, these 4 men take on the job. Sorcerer is one of the most white-knuckle thrillers I have ever seen. The stakes of having dynamite that can explode at a pin drop makes every bump or obstacle feel like a disaster is just right around the corner. Some of the things that Friedkin was able to capture on screen is just wild to me. These monster trucks and less than ideal roads and angles, the dirt and the sweat that covers everything on screen puts us into an atmosphere of suffocation where sometimes you forget to breathe. A large bump throws you to the edge of your seat, waiting to see if it's going to go off or not. It's this level of tension that feels rarely matched throughout the genre, quite like Sorcerer is able to pull off. The ending climax, to lean into more of the surrealism, feels like a transcendent piece of delirium after an onslaught of never-binding tension that acts almost as a reprieve. The film, though, really comes together just right out of the gate at the beginning. The first act takes us time to build our 4 main characters, allowing us to connect with them, with their 2 main kind of being Roy Scheider and Bruno Krimmer's characters, but taking the time to build the characters and allowing us to connect with them is really what cements the stakes of this job, and I loved every second of it. Number 4, The Last Temptation of Christ. This year I decided to finally pick up and watch a Martin Scorsese film that I've wanted to watch for a long time now. Scorsese is one of my favorite directors of all time, but there's still a handful of his films I haven't gotten a chance to see yet, and The Last Temptation of Christ was up there for sure. The Last Temptation is a very different take on the story of Jesus Christ, who is played brilliantly by Willem Dafoe, focusing on his turn to the Son of God, but also focusing on the man he was underneath the Holy Messiah. This coming to a third act as an examination on what path the young Son of God should go down. It doesn't paint him as an imperfect miracle worker, but rather a flawed man unsure of what his purpose is and questioning himself. If you're a diehard Christian, I could see how this film could easily upset you, but I don't think that's quite the intention. I think the intention is to show that Jesus also had temptations, and that the final temptation and his choice is what transformed him into a holy figure that we think of today. I will say seeing Jesus played by Harvey Keitel was a treat, because Keitel, in my opinion, is one of the greatest actors alive, and the more I see from him, the more and more I just love him as an actor. Dafoe, of course, is spectacular as well. This coming from Scorsese's filmography does seem like a little bit of an oddball on surface, but knowing that at one point in Scorsese's life he thought about becoming a priest, it makes a little bit more sense. Scorsese's directorial style is saturated all over this film, shining up to become a new favorite of mine from that masterful director that I love so much. Number 3, Blast of Silence. Sometimes going on a gut feeling for a blind buy pays out, and that's exactly what happened with Blast of Silence. From 1961, Blast of Silence follows Frank Bono, who is played by the director and writer of the film, Alan Barron, a hitman from Cleveland hired to take out a higher-up in the New York Mafia, but there's a stipulation that he can't be seen. When Frank is spotted tailing his target, he now has to solve the situation he's in. Blast of Silence is a riveting 77-minute feature full of style and flair, but also has some great moments of tension with a very noir-style voiceover to tie it all together. The film feels ahead of its time thanks to its lower-budget, scrappy nature that fixes the film with a more modern styling of modern cinema than its normal counterparts. There are great examples of handheld camera work in this film. The pace is lean and mean, and the gritty nature of the story, the main character, and violence makes the film feel like a stark standout. In the vein that kind of something like Hobo with a Shotgun is a modern tribute to grindhouse cinema, Blast of Silence feels like a modern tribute to hard-boiled noir movies without actually being a modern tribute. There's a certain sense of existentialism that plagues our main character that allows us to dive deeper into him, squeezing out someone who is a cold-blooded killer and why he's like this. Even him longing for something more that just pushes him further into the darkness. It's a fast-paced, brilliant film that really blew me away, and I can't recommend Blast of Silence enough. Number 2, the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. I grew up with SpongeBob SquarePants, and for some reason I never watched the original first feature of the Little Yellow Fry Cook. I covered this in more detail on my Screen to Console episode where I compared the film to the tie-in video game, so check that out. But this genuinely stood out to me as one of the best TV to screen adaptations I had ever seen. With a new Krusty Krab opening up, SpongeBob is in pursuit of the coveted manager position at the new restaurant, but when he's passed up for Squidward, SpongeBob falls into a deep depression. All while Plankton devises a scheme that involves framing Mr. Krabs for stealing King Neptune's crown. When SpongeBob stumbles his way into hurting Mr. Krabs' chance with King Neptune, SpongeBob and Patrick decide to go on a journey to get King Neptune's crown back. What I think makes the SpongeBob movie a true testament is that if only this movie and this movie alone was the only piece of SpongeBob media, everything still works perfectly. The film is the essence of what SpongeBob is to a great detail. The film can stand on its own, but also works as an amazing introduction to what SpongeBob is. The film perfectly blends live action animation while having some great fourth wall breaks that, to me, it will become a new perfect comfort movie that I've already watched a couple of times this year because it feels endlessly rewatchable. It's a great example of using animation to its fullest to express itself, and it feels rather flawless in its execution. Number 1, The City of Lost Children. My number 1 of the year, The City of Lost Children, was a film I watched early in 2025, but was a film that left such a strong impression on me that I haven't stopped thinking about it. It's a film that's been on my watch list for a long time, especially after seeing Amélie, which was a film that was solo directed by one of the co-directors of this film, Jean Pierre Jeunet. Set in a bizarre dystopia, Crank is a man that is rapidly aging due to the fact that he can't dream. So to solve this problem, he kidnaps the children of the city to steal their dreams. When the fun fair rolls into town, Crank kidnaps the younger brother of a strong man from that fair named One, played by Ron Perlman. One befriends a young orphan girl, Miette, who he asks to help find his little brother due to her street wiseness. I think the first thing that you'll notice about this film is how beautifully ugly it is. Jean-Pierre Jeunet and Marc Caro have such a strong and unique visual style to create something truly magical, almost like a dark fairy tale-like state. Despite the dark and grimy visuals, the film has such a unique charm and wit that rather than feeling mucky watching the grime-covered buildings and greenish water, it feels like a warm and cozy experience. I think stylistically is probably most comparable to something like Tim Burton, so it would be an easy recommendation if you're a fan of Burton's, but I do think there's such a strong sense of individualism and voice that it stands out as a unique vision that I prefer over Burton's personally. I love how the film leans into the absurd for comedy, but there's also a strong emotional core at the center around One and Miette. The scientist and Crank's whole world is infinitely fascinating, and that goes for the world itself outside of them. There's a Cyclops cult, the inner workings of the city in its sprawling maze-like layout, and of course all the sideshow freaks that inhabit the subplots like the conjoined twins or the ringmaster who has trained fleas to do his bidding. Every ounce of the film feels magical, it feels alive, and it feels like a world all on its own. This is a film that exceeded expectations and on a rewatch felt even more timeless, and honestly I kind of enjoyed it more on a second watch. This is a film that I would highly recommend to everyone to check out, and a film that for me I could see myself watching on a regular occasion. It's endlessly rewatchable, warm and comforting, expertly crafted and wholly original, and to me, The City of Lost Children is truly a masterpiece of cinema. So that was my list of the best films I watched in 2025. I think moving forward, like I said earlier, if I keep doing these kind of list videos, I just want to talk about great movies and hopefully recommend some movies that I really love to people who may have not have heard of them potentially, or maybe I'll say something that will kind of persuade them into checking out those movies. I'm really bad about not doing things on script. If you want to support what I do or buy some physical copies of my movies, there'll be a link in the description down below. Like, comment, subscribe, share, become a member, hype the video. All those things go a long way in helping me out. And there is a link to all my stuff down below as well. That's been my video. That's been 2025. Here's hopefully that 2026 will be a good year. We'll see, but I will see you all next time.